Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's get into today's AEW news. I'm going to start off talking about the ratings for this week's edition of Dynamite. Of course, it was a big week for AEW. It was a big week for AEW Dynamite because, of course, it was the first time that AEW had returned to their regular Wednesday night time slot. Now, obviously, the ratings, after being preempted by the NBA playoffs, moving to Friday, then to Saturday, weren't that great. Especially the Friday Night Dynamite episodes where they were airing from 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. The numbers weren't good. Now, the expectation was that once they move back to Wednesdays, once they move back from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., once they're back in their regular time slot, the numbers will improve and the audience will come back. But as we speculated here on the channel, that wasn't a guarantee. You know, the assumption was that they were going to come back, but who knows? Once you lose viewers, it's very difficult to get them back. Wow. The return to Wednesday nights, the return to 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. certainly paid off for AEW because they saw a big viewership increase this past week because Wednesday's new edition of AEW Dynamite reportedly drew 883,000 live viewers on TNT. This is according to Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics. This is up 36% from last week's Saturday Night Dynamite episode, which of course drew 649,000 viewers this past Saturday night. The Dynamite show on Wednesday night drew a 0.35 rating in the key 18 to 49 demographic. This is up 66.7% from the previous week's 0.21 rating on Saturday night. 66.7%. Absolutely huge increase in that key 18 to 49 demo, which of course is what the advertising executives and the television executives really care about. The 0.35 key demographic rating represents about 452,000 live viewers who watched the show from that 18 to 49 demographic. How interesting is that? Because Saturday night, 649,000 viewers watched AEW Dynamite in total. On Wednesday night, 452,000 viewers watched it just in the key demographic alone. That shows you how important the time slot of Wednesday night, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., how important that is for AEW. I think that's absolutely fascinating to see, and it goes to show the majority of AEW's audience is in that key demographic, which is what television networks are looking for. Now, of course, Dynamite featured several happenings advertised ahead of time. This included MJF versus Sammy Guevara in the main event, TNT champion Miro defeating Brian Pillman Jr., Chris Jericho's return to commentary, and the AEW World Tag Team Champions, the Young Bucks versus Eddie Kingston and Penta El Zero Miedo. The show this week faced significant competition from the NBA and the NHL, but still drew AEW's best Dynamite audience since the May 19th episode and the best 18 to 49 key demographic rating since the Blood and Guts special on May 5th. Wednesday's total viewership was up 36% from last week, while the key demo rating, as I mentioned, was up 66.7% from last week. Interestingly as well, Dynamite's viewership was up 18% from the same week in 2020, which went head-to-head with NXT in the Wednesday night time slots. The key demographic also was up 20.7% from the same week last year. How significant is that? I think that's the real telling number there. We can get very granular, and we can talk about the 18 to 49 demo. We can talk about total viewership. We can talk about increases from last week. I think we were always going to be expecting some increase from the previous week. That was always going to happen. The real interesting thing here, the real thing that I think is going to get people talking is that it's up nearly 20% from the same week in 2020, and the key demo is up over 20% from the same week in 2020. You don't really get that nowadays. You really don't. You don't tend to see increases year on year. We know television in general, irrespective of pro wrestling, television is dying a slow death anyway. Most years, year on year, unless you're live sports or your cable news, your ratings, your viewership, that's going down all the time. So for AEW to say, look, this time last year, less people were watching the product than are right now. This time last year, in that key demographic, which everyone really cares about, certainly, as I mentioned, the advertising executives, the television executives, 20% more people are watching. That's really significant. And I think it's a big, big win for AEW. I truly do, because, again, we spoke about it here on the channel, you know. The expectation was once we move back to Wednesday nights, once we get back in the time slot, people will come back. People will start watching again. That was never guaranteed, though. That was never, ever guaranteed. And, you know, frankly, I think they had a strong main event, an excellent match between Sammy Guevara and MJF. But if you're going to be honest, considering what's coming up in the next couple of weeks with Road Rager, Fyter Fest, and Fight for the Fallen, you've got 4 shows that are arguably far bigger than the one they presented on Wednesday in terms of matches that have stakes, in terms of stipulations, titles on the line, feuds that are going to be continuing, etc. The episode on Wednesday was arguably just your run-of-the-mill episode of Dynamite. It truly was, and it was setting up all of these specials that are going to happen over the course of July. So if I'm AEW, I'm ecstatic to see the number go back up to nearly 900,000. That's not far off a million, of course. I'm ecstatic to see the 18 to 49 demo back where it was, and the highest since Blood and Guts. That was the time, of course, where they were number 1 on cable for the first time in their history. So you could argue that despite a really tough June of being preempted, of being moved to Friday night to Saturday night, outside of the time slot to 10 p.m. to 12 a.m., all that kind of stuff, after a really tough June, now they're heading into July with immediately, again, all of this momentum that they had coming out of Double or Nothing. The live crowd, the 4 specials, a packed roster, really exciting, engaging storylines, 4 consecutive specials in a row. AEW now, I think, must be looking at this saying to themselves, we've got some really high expectations. Because if Wednesday's rating is anything to go by, then they must be hoping for, I don't know if they can they get to 1 million viewers 4 consecutive weeks? If they could do that, then that's real rapid growth for AEW. And I know people will say, well, it won't be long before AEW Dynamite's outdrawing Monday Night Raw in terms of viewership. I still think that's a very far way off. I mean, if Monday Night Raw does 1.5 million viewers for an average of 3 hours, that's like sirens going off, the world is ending. It's craziness, because it would have dropped so low for WWE. Their average still is that 1.7, 1.8 million viewers, and Dynamite's nowhere near that. I mean, you're talking about an extra million people tuning in to watch AEW Dynamite at that point. But, in the grand scheme of things, 2-3 years, who knows? Because if you're looking at the graphs here, if you were going to plot the Dynamite ratings or the Dynamite viewership versus the Raw viewership, one's going down, one's going up. Now, again, as I mentioned, they're still far off Monday Night Raw, and I think people are saying it's going to happen by the end of the year. I think frankly, that's ludicrous. I just don't see that happening. But, who knows? Who knows at this point? AEW, again, after a really difficult June, after a really difficult... again, a really difficult month of being preempted, being moved around, and having all of these WWE stands going, AEW in the mud, rah, rah, rah. That rating this past week says a lot. Certainly does. So exciting news for AEW, and congratulations on them for, very, very successful return to Wednesday nights. Let's talk about the Young Bucks. The Young Bucks have become famous recently for their bio memes. They'll send out a tweet and it'll say new bio, and it's something tongue-in-cheek. It's a funny quip, that kind of stuff. And the AEW World Tag Team Champions have done another one. They've changed their Twitter bio to take a friendly jab at AEW commentator Jim Ross for his WWE Dynamite botch. Now, as widely reported, we spoke about it here on the channel, Jim Ross referred to AEW Dynamite as WWE Dynamite when wrapping up this week's Dynamite broadcast on TNT. Now, the Bucks changed their Twitter bio to promote next Wednesday's title defense against Eddie Kingston and Penta El Zero Miedo. This is what it says. You can see it on the screen. It says, quote, Eddie and Penta, let's see if you can beat us next week when it counts on WWE Dynamite. Now, I know AEW does actually have quite a history of, making things either botches or off-the-cuff comments, making them into something. Obviously, they can't do anything with WWE Dynamite. They can't do anything about that. What I am glad to see is that I was slightly concerned when I first heard the Jim Ross, botch happen on the air. My concern was that social media would be like, get rid of this guy, retire, he's past it, he shouldn't even be doing commentary anymore, he shouldn't be a commentator anymore, he's terrible, he's old, he makes this mistake all the time, rah, rah, rah. And that's just not fair. That's just not fair. Mistakes happen. It's live television. I've been doing things like this where I say the wrong company because it just slips out. This is a guy that had been working with WWE since, 1993, something like that. We're talking working with the company on and off for over 20 years. Even now, when he's an AEW contracted talent, he still does a podcast where he largely talks about his experiences with WWE. So I'm going to forgive the guy for doing a bit of a Freudian slip and saying WWE, and it happens. It's live television, and I'm sure he feels terrible about it. I hardly think Jim Ross brushes it off and goes, it doesn't matter. Of course he's probably bummed out about it. It's happened before with the Kenny Omega thing, calling him the WWE champion. He said WWE Dynamite. again, like I said before, if you really truly thought you were getting Jim Ross, peak Jim Ross of the Attitude Era, commentating for AEW, then you're just deluded, because that was never going to happen. You're getting 2021 Jim Ross, which is a voice, which is credibility, which is he can sprinkle something on a moment and make it feel bigger, but he's still Jim Ross in 2021. He's not what he was in the Attitude Era. That's why you've got a three-man booth. That's why you've got Excalibur on there, who largely does the majority of the play-by-play, let's be honest here. So I'm not all about cancelling Jim Ross. Now, I do think there might be a discussion made of where really is the best place for JR at this point. I think he'll stick on Dynamite for a while. I think an argument could have been made that maybe he should have been moved to Rampage, help get the show over. It's a new show. It's in a difficult time slot, but I don't suspect that they would do that. If I'm going to be honest with you, I think they'll just stick how it is, and in a couple of weeks' time, people just forget about it. Maybe the Young Bucks or Kenny Omega or whoever will bring it up in a promo, and people will go, oh, that kind of stuff. That's probably the only thing that will happen about it. So I don't read that much into it. I just think it's a funny joke by the Young Bucks on their Twitter bio, which they're very good at. They're very good at doing that stuff. This is a really fun story, because Mick Foley has thrown his hat in the ring, if you will, to be the guest referee for a real possible death match, a Japanese death match between Atsushi Onita and Jon Moxley. Now, this would be a dream match. It really would. Now, Onita recently did an interview, and he expressed his desire to wrestle Moxley in a death match after being pressed by his violent clashes with Kenny Omega at Full Gear in 2019 and AEW Revolution in 2021. Now, Moxley, of course, is a self-proclaimed fan of Onita. He uses the Japanese Legends theme song Wild Things for his entrance in homage to Onita. He also wore a leather jacket at AEW Revolution, once again as a homage to Onita. So I think it can happen if Onita obviously seems up for it. And Mick Foley recently tweeted that he would love to don the official's jacket or shirt or whatever if this match were to ever go down. Foley wrote that he was humbled when the Japanese media used to dub him as, quote, the American Onita back in the day for his exploits in the deathmatch genre of wrestling in Japan. Foley said, quote, if an Onita versus Moxley match were to happen, I'd like to be the referee. I always felt the American Onita label given to me by the Japanese press and fans was a huge honor. To be honest with you, I think that the only thing ever stopping a Moxley versus Onita death match from happening was probably Onita's interest, if he wanted to do it or not. He does occasional appearances now. I think has he relaunched FMW for like the 10 millionth time or something like that. He, in more recent years, has done occasional matches. They've largely been six-man tags and stuff like that. But, for the right amount of money, there is no doubt in my mind, once Tony Khan got a whiff of Onita going, sure, I'd wrestle Jon Moxley in a death match. I've been very impressed by his matches so far. And obviously him paying homage to, the leather jacket, the entrance with Wild Things and all that kind of stuff. If I'm Tony Khan, as soon as I heard that, I'm making some phone calls. I'm saying, right, let's make it happen. Returning to touring, of course you would want to make that match happen, because with AEW's audience, that will sell out an arena. Moxley, Onita, of course that will. Now, would that happen on TNT? Or would that happen on pay-per-view? Logic would suggest it would probably happen on pay-per-view, given the violence involved, in the same vein of the exploding death match and all that kind of stuff. Maybe it's the way to right the wrong of the exploding death match earlier this year by AEW, with that just terrible, terrible finish with the sparklers and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's the way to right that wrong and do a proper exploding death match between Moxley, between Onita, inside of an AEW ring, maybe at Full Gear or something like that. If I'm Tony Khan, I'm picking up the phone. I'm saying, we can make this happen. If Onita wants it to happen, Moxley wants it to happen. As far as Foley being involved, I don't know what Foley's WWE commitments would be involved in that. I think Foley is signed to a Legends deal. I don't know if that would exclude him from doing AEW appearances, but I get the impression with Foley, he'd be like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. I don't care. So I think I'd be down for a Moxley Onita match. I think everyone would. Is it going to be like watching Onita in the late 80s, early 90s FMW? Of course not. He's an older man at this point, but I don't think it matters, especially when you're involved in that deathmatch stuff. It's just, and I'm hardly, an expert on deathmatch wrestling or anything like that, certainly the Japanese deathmatch wrestling scene or anything of that nature, but I guess you don't have to be the best wrestler in the world. It's hardly going to be a scientific match. You're going to be taking crazy bumps and stuff's going to be exploding, and the story's there as well. Moxley can say, look, I idolize you, and Onita can be like, no, I'm pissed off. Why are you wearing my jacket? Why are you coming out to my music? I'm not having that. You have to earn it. You can't disrespect me by coming out to my music, wearing my attire, pretending to be me, cosplaying as Onita. No. You have to earn it, and you're going to earn it by facing me in an exploding barbed wire death match at Full Gear later this year. That's money. That's absolute money. And I'm sure Tony Khan will be all over it. I'm positive of it. So I think it happens. I think, again, the only thing that was holding it back in the past would have been if Onita was interested in doing it. And obviously, he seems very interested in doing it. So that's exciting. That's very exciting. Now, speaking of a match that is looking to happen in the future, Shaquille O'Neal and Paul White. Now, NBA legend Shaquille O'Neal sat down with PopCulture.com to talk about his match in All Elite Wrestling back in March. Now, O'Neal hasn't been seen in AEW since he and Jade Cargill defeated Cody Rhodes and Red Velvet, but the Hall of Famer said he will return to the ring at some point, and when he does, he'll be coming for one more man. He said, quote, "I'm made of steel, so there's no broken bones." He said in regards to the table bump he took in AEW, "It was fun. I wish we could have had 17, 18,000, so it could have felt a little bit more. It was actually 1,500, 2,000 people there, so it was pretty good. But I look forward to doing it again. I hear Paul White is still talking trash, so I'm going to work out really hard this summer, and maybe we can do something really, really soon." Now, a match between, of course, Paul White, the Big Show, and Shaquille O'Neal has been teased for years. It almost occurred in WWE at WrestleMania 33 in 2017. O'Neal was adamant that nothing could prevent the match from happening around this time. He said, quote, "There shouldn't be any problems for us getting together now. Last time there was a lot of bureaucracy and red tape. Now there is no red tape. I'm still kind of sore from that table, so I'm going to work out during the summer, pump these muscles up, and I'll be waiting for you, Mr. Paul." Now, Paul White responded to these comments. He said, quote, "I'm not hard to find. Simple as that." So it looks like we are going to get Paul White versus Shaquille O'Neal in AEW. Look, is it going to be this amazing scientific match or this kind of ridiculous? Of course it isn't. Of course it isn't. It wasn't going to be that in WWE. It's an attraction. It's an attraction. Shaquille O'Neal obviously is still a very big name. You know, he's still Shaquille O'Neal. He's an NBA Hall of Famer. He's on TNT. He's part of the NBA coverage for TNT. So, of course, he's going to be involved in all of that. And Paul White's still the Big Show. He's still Paul White. And maybe his first match inside of an AEW ring, what better way to do your AEW in-ring debut than against Shaquille O'Neal? It's just a case of when that happens. Maybe it's all out. And again, now they're in the business of selling tickets once again. They have to find the right time. It shouldn't just happen, I don't think, on a random episode of Dynamite. It should be at a pay-per-view or something like that. Or, again, maybe it happens in a Florida. But they've been in Florida the whole time anyway. So I don't know. I don't know when it will happen, but it's going to happen. And it's just another one of those instances, I guess, with WWE in the sense that they get in their own way. They get in their own way of a good idea. I don't think anyone in WWE or fans of WWE or whatever in that build-up to WrestleMania 33, no one thought, oh, I can't wait to see it because it's going to be this great match. I think everyone was like, it's just going to be an attraction. It's going to get eyeballs on the product. And in the same vein as if WWE, when they get in celebrities and athletes to work their shows, and I'd never complain because it's smart marketing and it gets eyeballs on the product, I'm not going to complain when it happens with AEW. I'm going to say the same thing. It's smart. It got a lot of attention when Shaq wrestled earlier on this year. It'll get even more attention when he wrestles another giant in the Big Show, who Cody Rhodes won't admit it, and AEW certainly won't admit it, but Paul White's a far bigger star than Cody Rhodes is. More people know who Paul White is than Cody Rhodes. Sorry, Cody. I know that AEW and that they might not want to admit that, but that is the case. That is the case right there. Now, Anna Jay has been in the headlines recently for her relationship with Jungle Boy, but she recently revealed how close she is to returning to the ring after a shoulder injury. Of course, she's been out of action since February after suffering a shoulder injury during training, and according to Jay, the injury was the same one she suffered earlier in her wrestling career. She said, quote, "Unfortunately, I don't know if the surgery was not what it was supposed to be or recovery or anything like that. I'm not sure. I ended up tearing my labrum in my shoulder again in training. Same arm, same tear, everything. They just think that maybe the first surgery was not 100% well done. And yeah, I just tore my labrum, found out. Obviously, I was really bummed out, but I'm really hoping, fingers crossed, this surgery is the charm and I won't have to worry about this ever again. But unfortunately, injuries are a part of what we do." Now, months after surgery, Jay is finally feeling back to normal, but when asked when she would be returning to the ring, she revealed that she wasn't sure how far off that was. She said, "I don't really know. I know everything is on track, how it should. Of course, the doctors don't really want to say because it could change. I don't really know. But yeah, everything is going how it should. Obviously, I'm hoping sooner than later, but then again, I'm also not rushing it. I don't really have a time frame yet, so we'll see. I had surgery on March 11, so it's been about 3 months now, but I feel really good. Everything feels normal now, but obviously it's not. It's not resting normal, I guess. So we don't really have an update. I mean, I would argue maybe. Shoulders are difficult ones. That shoulder stuff's changed over the course of the last few years. You know, we've seen people like Finn Balor or Cesaro or more be out of action with shoulder injuries for like nearly a year. Same with Sheamus. He was out for like 9 months with a shoulder injury. So I would say maybe the end of the year. Maybe it might even be January next year. Time will only tell. I guess the positive, she can appear on Dynamite if she wants to, but even then, again, shoulders, they're complex. It's a very complex joint, so I don't know, but it's just good to hear that she's feeling back to her normal self, and hopefully will be returning soon. Speaking of injuries as well, finally, we'll talk about Joey Janella, because he's currently out with a concussion. Now, it was noted back on the 1st of June how Janella had revealed he was dealing with an injury and was not medically cleared to compete. At that point, he said doctors did not know the severity of the injury, but he is expected to be back in the ring by around July. Now, Janella was forced to pull out a few game-changer wrestling shows because of this, but was almost 85% sure he'd be able to wrestle at the July 10 GCW show in Dallas. In an update, Janella recently appeared on the Wrestling Perspective podcast and confirmed that he's dealing with a concussion. He said, "I'll be coming back soon. I'm dealing with a little injury right now, a little concussion. It happens. Everyone knows that. It's wrestling, all sports. Everyone gets concussions. So I'll be cleared from that, I think, in the coming weeks, maybe the coming weekend. So I'll be good. I'll be doing, hopefully, some AEW stuff soon. Things were about to pick up for me there right before the concussion happened." Now, there's no word yet on when Janella suffered the concussion, but of course, we'll keep you updated about that. It could be during that May 28th edition of Friday Night Dynamite where he lost to Hangman Page. There was a spot in there where Page hit him with, I think it was a boot to the face or a lariat to the face. Maybe it was a case of that, so time will only tell. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these AEW news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, get the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or having come across this video today. And I'll speak for you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.